Joining me now is just one of the first two Native American women to serve in Congress, Democratic Representative Sharice Davids of Kansas. She's also the vice chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, so we need to talk about infrastructure, and the co-chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus. So we're going to talk about those comments in a second. But, Congresswoman, we're talking about a lot of firsts here. As we know, you're one of the first two Native American women. You're the first Democrat elected to Kansas in a decade. You were the first openly LGBT Native American elected to Congress. You were raised by an Army veteran mom, but mostly the thing you and I never get to talk about is that you were a former MMA fighter. And I just needed to get that in there because I don't know if everybody knows that about you, but I think it's fantastic.
Well, it's great to be back here with you. And I love everything that you just said. And also, I have to say that I loved the segment about Alina. I'm very excited to see what she does in her life. That
is going to be amazing to watch. Let's talk about what Rick Santorum said. On one level, we don't want to give these things air and oxygen. On the other level, it's a moment to just remind people who were listening to Santorum that he's just wrong about that. People didn't just show up here and there was nothing. And there aren't there's ample evidence of Native American culture in our lives and around us.
Yeah, well, Rick Santorum might be surprised to hear that we are still here. And I think that you're absolutely right. It is hard to decide what to do in that situation. But certainly, I think highlighting the ignorance of his statements and really his train of thought is, I actually think, very important. And that's because right now we are at a place in our country's history where we know that the relationship between the United States and indigenous or native people that have been here for a long time is obviously it's complex. It's painful a lot of times. And these ignorant comments just highlight exactly why we have to be talking about this. And that, yes, Native people contribute so much to our country, and it's really important. So I'm glad we're getting a chance to highlight that.
Are you making strides in dealing with that kind of ignorance? The fact that we now have a cabinet secretary in Deb Haaland, someone you know very well, was a friend of yours from Congress. The fact that you're there, I know that you don't go to Congress every day in some fashion overtly representing indigenous and native interests, but do you feel that these things make progress? We have had a number of members of Congress who had some native ancestry and still do. Does it help? Does it move the needle?
Yeah, I think that actually this idea of having a more reflective government is really, really important. And, you know, in 2018, when Deb Haaland and I were elected to be the first two Native women to serve in Congress, I think that that had a huge impact, in part because one, the policies that we're pushing for as two people who both have law degrees and both really understand the relationship between the U.S. government and tribal governments, but also because of our lived experience. We know that being in the room, asking the questions, looking around and saying, who else hasn't been here before is a really important part of what we bring to the table when people like now Secretary Haaland and I show up to all the different places that we go to in D.C. and the seat of our federal government power.
I want to ask you about infrastructure. It's a topic you know a lot about. It's a topic that Americans are going to come to know a lot about in the coming days. This administration is proposing a sweeping infrastructure bill that addresses the things we normally think of, roads and bridges, and it addresses broadband in rural areas, but it goes further than that and addresses a lot of things that Republicans are being critical of as a Democratic wish list, things that are not hard infrastructure, so they don't think it should be funded by the government. Your thoughts?
Well, certainly infrastructure. I feel like infrastructure is the mechanism by which all of us are able to stay connected, to get connected to each other and to opportunity. And infrastructure is the thing that helps us live the lives that we want to live. And certainly infrastructure and what it means has evolved over time. I'm old enough to remember when broadband wouldn't have been considered part of infrastructure. And now we know that if we are talking about broadband, people will think that we don't know what we're doing. And obviously, the conversation about infrastructure has got to continue to evolve. And I'm really glad that the Biden administration is open to a robust infrastructure package, because that's what this country really needs.
Congresswoman, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Democratic Representative Sharice Davids of Kansas and former MMA fighter. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.